Hello, everybody. We are the Clean Hits crew. It is officially the dog days of summer. So what better thing to do than talk about all those little tidbits that have been coming in over the past week or so since the NHL free agency period, the NHL draft. Gosh, I guess that was only a week and a half ago. Huh. Time flies, right? Well, things are going to be slowing down here now that we're in the middle of July, and we still have a little bit of news breaking through. So we're going to take that time today to kind of break some of that down. We'll probably have more interesting segments about kind of roster construction, where the roster's at, maybe ranking our top 10 prospects, and we may even have some exciting interviews coming up in the near future. But for now, we'll put on our kind of breaking news hats for the time being and kind of dissect what has happened since free agency period. My name is Brad, a.k.a. Gretzky Betskis. This is the Clean Hits crew. We got Kenny. How you doing, Kenny? You staying out of the heat as best as you can?
Yeah, trying to. But you're right. It kind of feels like things have significantly slowed down since the last time we talked. I feel like I'm still waiting for Celine Dion to make the pick. It's just so slow. Everything's going slow. But the good news is, hockey never stops. So we do have a few pieces of information to chew on. But other than that, yeah, I'm good, man. I'm excited to talk hockey.
Fantastic. Corey, how you doing up there in the nice north? I'm hoping it's a little bit cooler than the brutal 110 down here, 115. We had 117 2 days ago.
It's always cooler here. It's right. It's not our desert temperatures, but it's sticky and hot and it's gross. So
sticky. Good.
Would much rather be in a hockey rink right now.
Yep, agreed. Yeah. And then Trent, how are you doing? Speaking of hockey rinks, when's the last time you've skated?
Last night. Nice. And I had the same feeling. I was parking the car at the rink, and it was so stinking hot out here. I was melting, and I was like telling my 9-year-old, like, hurry up, grab your gear, let's get in there, quick. And like run inside, like, finally it's nice in here in the ice rink. Yeah. So definitely coached some squirts last night, some 10Us. So I'll be coaching some games tomorrow as well. So really good to beat the heat in the rink. I drive by those T-ball dads out there coaching in this heat melting, and I just think, you suckers, you've done it so wrong.
Yep. A little bit cheaper, but
yeah, that's for sure.
Fair.
And for anybody that is tuning in from Utah, man, down here in Phoenix right now, just go turn your oven on to like 375 and just kind of leave it open, and then take a blow dryer and start blowing out that hot air. And that's just kind of how it feels all the time. It's awful. True hockey weather, if you will.
And then paint everything beige inside your house. There's a lot of beige out here.
That's for Brad. Look at that. You can tell he's the one who's in like real estate and flipping and design and stuff. He's the only one who's not just totally beige. Yeah,
exactly. That's so true. I didn't think
it's a mindset. The cooler my room feels, the cooler it is in the house. But yeah, let's jump right into it. But first, I will pump the brakes one more time. If you are not already following us, make sure to subscribe to us at cleanhits.substack.com. I may have released the biggest fluff piece that you possibly could in the offseason, breaking down different types of goal songs the team potentially could have. And then we followed that right up with Corey's like very analytical, mathematical, breaking down every type of contract you could possibly think of, what an ELC means, where is Iginla going, and the dichotomy of those two pieces probably couldn't be any further apart than they were. But those are kind of the types of articles that we put out at Clean Hits. We do player spotlights. We're going to start breaking down individual roster players throughout the offseason so you can become more familiar with the team before that first puck drop. Also, make sure you're following us on Twitter/X at Clean Hits Hockey. And you can find us on YouTube and Spotify. And hopefully, I got my fingers crossed that we will be on Apple Podcasts by this weekend. I got some time to carve into that and excruciatingly go through that process again and hopefully get us all cleared so you can listen to us on any of your favorite places to listen to podcasts. But the big news that kind of came out, what was that, Monday or last Friday? I have no idea of what day of the week it is or when things drop. But that would be Barrett Hayton re-signing with the team for 2 years. This was a very interesting contract specifically around that amount of time, because that 2 years still allows us to have contractual rights over the player, since he still will be a restricted free agent. He will not be able to just walk away as an unrestricted free agent, so into that free agency period that we kind of alluded to earlier, which means that next time his contract rolls around, Barrett Hayton and the team will have kind of all the negotiating power that we would need to make something work for both sides here. I think this is extremely important, especially because Hayton is, one, a former 5th overall pick in the 2018 draft. It was a big surprise pick. We got Chika'd that year, I'd like to say. I remember me and Trent were watching that draft. We were extremely excited that Zadina had fallen at that point, who was kind of considered the 3rd overall top prospect that year. Luckily, we did avoid that one. And then we're immediately wildly disappointed after having stood up and given each other high fives when Barrett and Hayton was called from the Sault Ste. Marie. I believe was it Craig Button who kind of started breaking the idea that we were selecting Hayton before this pick was even made.
The camera zoomed right in on him. They used to be really bad about spoiling every pick. They did. Yeah. That's one nice thing that we saw at the Sphere is they stopped doing the pick spoilers just in time to kill the decentralize the draft. So that's a bummer.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was much better this year.
Yes,
but yeah, we were sitting there and we're like, why are they showing Barrett Hayton right now? Why are they zooming in on Barrett Hayton right now? What's happening? Why is Barrett Hayton on the TV screen right now? And not Quinn Hughes. Not Quinn Hughes. That's all right. We're here.
Yeah, no. And honestly, when you're looking back at it, obviously there were some top defensemen that we could have taken. This is the same class that Quinn Hughes was available when Arizona/Utah selected at 5th. Noah Dobson, who's turned out to be a pretty solid defender. You could arguably say he is a top defenseman, at least a really solid number 2. Evan Bouchard, who I put a small little bet in for winning the Norris next year, because if this kid can rack up 70 to 80 points playing with McDavid, Skinner, Draisaitl, Arvidsson, the list goes on. We know how the Norris goes. And who else were some of the those are probably the big 3 that we missed out on, I would say. But Barrett Hayton does play a premium position, as John Chika used to say. And he could still be our potential 2C, our second line center for the future. I think there's a lot of hope. The big upside to Hayton still, despite what his numbers look like, if you were to go look at his Elite Prospects Hockey Futures or even his Wikipedia page and look at his stats, is he just turned 24 on June 9th. So he was pretty young for his draft year, which means there's still time for him to grow. He's still probably filling out as a center as far as his body size goes. And that can really lead into that extra strength he may play. We saw a big kind of change in his play over the past 2 seasons, even though unfortunately we didn't get to see him much last year, where he started to really become a net front presence. And I think under Andre Tournier, we saw a lot of development in his game, a lot more confidence, especially in that second half of the season 2 seasons ago, where he almost became a point per game player for about a couple months at the end of the season, playing with Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz on the top line. And it's kind of crazy to say this, but he's kind of becoming a pest. I feel like almost half the time there's a scrum in front of the net, the camera zooms in on Barrett Hayton giving one of the just biggest shit-eating grins, smiling at some beefy guy who was trying to knock him off in front of the net, and just giving him the worst kind of clown face you could possibly imagine, and just utterly pissing off the other team. And as he gets older and more mature and builds more confidence, I think we're going to see this grow. And I am a little hopeful here, but I think this is an important player for the team down the future. as a roster player or potentially as a decent trade chip as we get near the end of that contract. So I want to hear what you guys think. His career high is only 43 points, but he did have 19 goals that season, which was the 22-23 season. And I believe it was the first month and a half he was pointless, correct? Or was it goalless that he was?
2 Octobers in a row, 0 points.
Yes. So again, a lot of those points in that season came in the later half of the season. He is a little bit injured, has a little bit of an injury bug tendency. Last season, he did only play 33 games. So health is going to be a major concern here. But is it a case of bad luck, or is this going to be a player who's kind of blossom in front of our eyes this year, especially with a fuller roster, with some of the younger players kind of maturing a little bit more? And is Hayton ready to take that next step as being potentially our top center for at least the next season or two?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at him when he was first drafted, when he first cracked the roster with the Coyotes, like you said, his game has progressed. He looks faster. He's thicker.
Yes.
He knows how to use his body more. He's obviously been a very cerebral player since he played for the Sioux. He played for the Sioux, right? That's where he came from. Yeah. Yeah, and you could tell just from his highlights and the prospect breakdowns that he was going to be a smart player, and you see glimpses of that. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember that game against Winnipeg where he just completely undressed 3 Jets players, and then as he was falling, had this amazing backhand, I guess tap in against Connor Hellbuck of all people. So, I mean, he does have it in him to be kind of a water bug pest out there, always, elusive and using that big frame. I mean, and 43 points is nothing to scoff at, right? I mean, that's pretty decent, right? And especially with the point clip that he put up in his abbreviated stint last year. If he has a full healthy year, I would say playing with Keller and Smalls, there's no reason why he couldn't put up 50 plus points. And that right there is a 2C number. He could put up more and really make it interesting. Who knows? But I'm excited to see him as well. I'm happy at the term. Obviously, he's going to be under team control, and definitely happy with the number as well.
I think that Corey did a great job of covering some of the obstacles that Barrett faced breaking into the league. And I'll let Corey kind of delve into those in a little bit more detail here in a minute, because there's just a ton of roadblocks that he had to face. But what we've seen from Barrett Hayton is those flashes and plays that you talked about, Kenny, like the one against Hellebuck that was unreal. And Brad, we've seen that confidence grow, like you mentioned, and him kind of playing the net front, the bumper, going in the corners, being the plumber and doing the dirty work for Keller and Schmaltz are doing their crazy high cycle, flash and dash finesse play. And they've got someone who's got a little bit of oomph to their game to help support the middle of the ice for them. So they're free to do their thing. Right. And seeing that type of play is not new to Hayton. I think, in reading Corey's article, I remembered so vividly something that I'd kind of forgot with all the baggage around Hayton, which was that Team Canada performance with the separated shoulder. And he scores that last minute tying goal to send it to overtime. Couldn't even raise his arms to celebrate because his shoulder had been dislocated. And there he is, like a dog in the slot, fighting for the puck and knocking in a clutch goal as a huge leader for Team Canada. And that's in there, right? Some guys take a little bit longer, and honestly, he hasn't even taken that long, in my opinion. There's someone that we always joke that he looks physically like, just his countenance, right? Just his actual face looks a bit like Shane Doan. They don't play the same way, but there is a physical resemblance, and I think from a career trajectory perspective, there could be a glimmer of hope to be found in the Shane Doan example. Doaner, best player in Coyotes history, was drafted 7th overall, so just a bit later than Barrett. In Shane's first season in the NHL, he had 7 goals and 17 points in 74 games. In his second season, he had 12 points in 63 games. Then in his third season, he finally did get sent down and split time between Phoenix and the Springfield Falcons at that time. And once again, had very modest numbers, 11 points in 33 games that season, which should sound vaguely familiar, as Barrett Hayton had 11 points in 33 games this last season, I believe. And then once again, that following season again. So now we're 4 full years removed from his draft year. He comes in with a 22-point season. It's a very slow start to his career before he finally turns the corner and has a 51-point season, and he never looks back. He's a solid contributor, scoring 20 goals a year every year after that for the rest of his career, basically. He turned into such a solid player, but it took him a long time to get going. Doan, not only a slow start to his professional career, but also an infamous slow starter every season. I mean, he is probably the worst October player I can remember in Coyotes history. So there's another little parallel there with Hayton. I don't mean to say that he's Shane Doan, but I do mean to say that a kid at 22 years old scoring 19 goals and 24 assists for a dead last terrible Coyotes team with a coach that didn't have a lot of confidence in him is, to Kenny's point, nothing to scoff at, and a good glimmer of hope for a potential bright future with Barrett Hayton that we're not going to have to wait for, I don't think. We're going to know this year, I believe, what Hayton is and what he can bring to the table, so long as he's healthy.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And what I do like, again, just kind of reiterating the contract, $2.65 million per year over the course of 2 seasons. So if we don't see that growth this year, it's not like we overpaid him. So nobody's going to blink if he has to play 3C down the road, be the kind of third line center who does a great job on the penalty kill. I don't think anybody will be really disappointed at that point because we're so far removed from this draft. It was a different management at that point that selected him 5th overall. And again, we have Baudouin coming up. He'll be 1 year closer at that point. Castanga as well. So there are some prospects here that could be kind of slowly knocking at the door, but keep your fingers crossed, because if he's coming around at the end of this contract and we give him that upgrade and now we re-sign him for maybe something closer to the Dursey contract, maybe even get a little extra term on that, I mean, we're going to be kind of set at our 1-2C pivots there. Corey,
well,
one thing
though, you did mention something earlier, and you kind of hinted at it there again, which is the trade chip piece here if he does develop. And what I want to say about that is his trade floor is really high and will remain that high as long as Kyle Dubas is still a GM in this league, because he's a Sioux Greyhound. And we know that Kyle will pay through the nose for any former Sioux Greyhound. So he's going to retain a lot of value no matter how poorly he plays in the future. We ought to be able to mitigate anything like that. In case, worst case scenario, break the glass, trade him to Pittsburgh, get at least a second back, I'm sure.
You heard it here first, folks. Barrett Hayton to the Pittsburgh Pirates at the beginning of the 2026, 2027. Jeez, I was just at the Pirates game last week. Give me a break.
I was going to say, he's sent out of the league, apparently. I love that.
He's got a pretty good slider.
Dubas is in there somewhere.
One thing I do want to highlight, too, and Corey just put out a piece on Hayton and kind of the long journey he took to get here. It's kind of the yo-yo effect that happened early in his career. So, Corey, would you mind? It's probably a little bit fresher on your mind, kind of revisiting a little bit of that. And then again, your opinion of maybe some of the expectations we should have for him this season.
Yeah. So Barrett Hayton was a player who really didn't follow the traditional development path. He was taken 5th overall in the draft by John Chaika, who was the general manager at the time. I believe Dave Tippett would have been the coach that year. So Hayton went back to the Sioux for that first year, but then he played on the Coyotes the next year. I think there was a lot of almost pressure from management to get Hayton into the NHL to try and back up their reasoning for taking him 5th overall. If you go back to his draft year, I think he was ranked around 9th, 10th on most lists. So a bit of a reach at 5, but not, totally, something that shouldn't have happened. But Barrett Hayton comes into the NHL at 19. And that coaching staff at that time, bit of a different philosophy from how Utah operates now. You could word it that way. Kind of break into the league, play on the fourth line, earn your minutes, that sort of thing. Not play in a role that he was used to, playing top line, second line in the Sioux, not getting a whole lot of playing time, either limited minutes or just watching from above, as they called it. He would learn from the press box and wouldn't be on the ice. So a bit of a different philosophy now. But really a disjointed development path. Typically it's juniors to the American Hockey League to the NHL. Barrett Hayton has not played a lot of time in the AHL. I believe it's 35 games over 3 years. There's been missed time. We point to the breakout year, but then last year, only 33 games, right? Misses almost half the year with a hand injury, lower body. I don't remember the exact ailment, what it was for the remainder of the year. That was another 17 games. Even the year prior to the breakout, missed some time with a wrist injury, had the shoulder injury at the World Juniors. So he's kind of like that operation board game at this point with all these different injuries. I don't know if he's really just injury prone, or I think he's more so unlucky. And I think that's really the thing that needs to turn for this coming season. Just needs a little bit of luck. He is going to play with Keller and Schmaltz. He does have that chemistry. At the same time, I think we can admit that he's getting that role because you look at his competition for center, and Logan Cooley is going to get there. He is going to be the 1C on this team in maybe a year from now. But, when beyond that, when your options at center are Nick Bukestad, Alex Kerfoot, Jack McBain, the top line center would be Barrett Hayton. And like we spoke to earlier, his willingness to go to the front of the net, to be a bit of that pest. He's really found the chemistry with those two, Keller and Schmaltz, who are more offensive minded, and it seemed to really work. 22 points in 22 games in that breakout season. That's nothing to scoff at. The Coyotes are not typically a team that's had a point per game player. That was still a short-term thing, but still it's something to really look forward to as well, and what this player can be.
Yeah, and
the pandemic didn't do him any favors either. That was tough on everybody, but he was in a pretty critical time where he was new in the league at that point.
Yes,
and was really trying to make his way. And he ended up having to go to Finland for a time and things like that as well. And I think when it comes to injuries and being injury prone, it's kind of hard to scientifically think about what that might mean, right? There's some injuries that reoccur, the same thing over and over again. Martin Hansel's back, that's injury prone. Merrick Svatos' shoulder, which was just constantly coming out and had to get surgery after surgery after surgery. R.I.P. Svatos, by the way. And then there's guys who get injured a lot because they're not in great shape or they don't alter their game very well. Peter Pruka weighed 170 pounds and got absolutely smoked constantly, just crushed in games. He wasn't big enough to compete. He was injury prone as a result. Nolan Patrick, who just had to retire, never spent any time in the gym, wanted to play in the NHL rail thin. Didn't work out for him. He got lit up constantly and was hurt a lot. Barrett Hayton doesn't meet the criteria of these things. It's different parts of him that get injured. He plays a solid, hard game. He's not a reckless player. He's not overly small. He's pretty sturdy. He's an elite athlete. So I don't see a reason to think that he's going to continue to be injury prone, other than to Corey's point, bad luck. And I think bad luck has played a huge part in Barrett Hayton's slow start.
Yeah, and he's ripped. I don't know if you guys seen him. He's absolutely ripped. And he, like you said, he's sturdy. You look at that. You were naming off all those people with ailments, and these guys, how they were rail thin. And then you just look at the outlier, like Phil Kessel, what is he doing? Just kind of, how did that guy have an Ironman streak? But anyway, I'm going off topic here. One thing I think that everybody that isn't familiar with Hayton should know is that he's got an incredible attitude and is loved by his teammates. So that could take you a long way, especially on this team who have gone through a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kenny.
Yeah, Andre Tourney's mentioned that as well. I don't know if Barrett Hayton would be in the running for the captain of this team, but he is somebody who is looked at as a leader. He has a lot of those kind of leadership qualities. He was the captain in the Sioux. He was the captain of that Canadian team. And to be the captain of that Canadian team, where a lot of those guys are the captain or the alternate captain for their junior team, that's a pretty high accomplishment as well. So probably not going to be the captain in Utah, but I wouldn't be surprised if he wears a letter at some point.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Unless he's a Pittsburgh Penguin in a couple of years here.
Pirate. Pirate. Yeah, come on. He's got shortstop written all over it.
Well, one thing that I kind of posted on Twitter too is kind of a plant your flag moment. And I'm going to just say right here, I think if Hayton can stay healthy, if he can avoid some of these freak injuries that just kind of keep on happening to him, I think we got a 20-goal scorer here. I mean, there's players who make their career in front of the net. It may not be the prettiest goals, but if you got Schmaltz and Keller kind of dipsy doodling around the net, getting pucks close to the net, Hayton being kind of a thick boy, if you will, can kind of pot some of these in those dirty areas. And again, he was almost there in pretty much, 3/5 of a season 2 seasons ago. 19 goals, just needed one more. And had we had that type of production last season, he potentially could have been that 8th goal scorer on this team. Again, 16th, tied for 15th in goals for per game last season. If we potentially can replicate that and have, again, 6 to 8 20 goal scorers on this team, the offense should be in a very good position. And now we've done those improvements on the defense. This is going to be a team to kind of watch out for. I'm not going to put any flags on playoffs yet, but again, lots to be excited here. When we actually kind of break down the roster, we can maybe make our own predictions as well. But Barrett Hayton, again, beautiful contract. Term is fantastic because it sets us up to be able to negotiate and bring him in on something that makes sense for both the player and team. Otherwise, we still would have his rights to actually trade and move him. And like Trent said, this is a type of center that no matter what is going to be valuable. Even if he's kind of caps out at that 35 to 45 point center who half of those points are coming from goals, most teams in the league are going to want a young kind of battle-ready center on their roster, whether that is on that third line or second line. Now, one other topic I want to bring up about Hayton before we move on, talking about that center depth. That is one thing this team does lack, and the talk of Bjugstad being that number one center. When Hayton went out last year, there were quite a few Arizona fans who were pretty pleased with Bjugstad's play up at the top line. I, for one, thought it was pretty good. He was a good shoe-in and fill-in for that time period, but I don't think the upside is there, and I don't think he had the same chemistry that Hayton had with Schmaltz and Keller. So thoughts on Hayton continuing to take that role? I think it's too difficult to say we want to separate Cooley and Gunther after seeing that chemistry they had at the end of the season. But I think there are arguments to be made for Bjugstad centering Keller and Schmaltz at the top line, maybe giving Hayton better matchups and maybe having Hayton kind of shelter maybe a kid like Josh O'Done on the third line. So thoughts on there? I am pro Hayton on the top line, but I do know that is a conversation that has been kind of running around the circles of both Coyotes and Utah Hockey Club fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that chemistry is there. And Barrett Hayton, he sort of reminds me of, do you remember the West Coast Express they had years ago in Vancouver? Brendan Morrison with Marcus Naslund and Todd Bertuzzi, both star players. Yeah. He wasn't at their level, but he had that chemistry. I mean, those were both point per game players. And that can be the case in Utah too, right? Clayton Keller will be a point per game player. Nick Schmaltz can be if he wants to be. And Barrett Hayton, I think 50, 55, 60 points isn't out of the question because he has that chemistry and because he has that willingness to go to the net.
I think that's a great point about Brendan Morrison kind of being the third leg of the stool between two star players. I think, Steve Ruchin did that for a long time between Korea and Solani and Anaheim. So there's another name of kind of like, a guy who does all the dirty work on a top line, right? And I think that, ideally, I'd like to see Hayton stay with Keller and Schmaltz, but I'd like to see that line become the second line over time. I'd love to see the line featuring Cooley and Gunther overtake them as an entire line rather than the idea of sticking Cooley on that line. I want to see Gunther and Cooley take such big steps that that becomes the premier line on this team, and Keller and Hayton and Schmaltz have to take a back seat. So that's my goal.
Yeah, Kenny, are you going to be the lone person to make the Bjugstad argument? And anybody watching, let us know what you think too. Bjugstad number 1C, or let Hayton kind of work his magic up there still?
I think you have to give Hayton a shot for sure.
Yeah.
On day one, you have to put him back to where he was before he got injured. But to your point, I mean, what a fine Bukestad that has been. I mean, tremendous leader, again, loved in the locker room, big boy. And he's decent on faceoffs. In fact, I looked it up. Both he and Barrett Hayton are right around 50%, which, I mean, obviously need a little bit of improvement, but especially for top line centers. And maybe that's something that comes along in Cooley's game, and hopefully, because that's important, right? I know Stenlund's good on draws, and so we've got a face-off guy there, but he's not a top-line center, right? So you have to give Hayton the reps up there, the at-bats, and, if just let whatever happens happen, right? If somebody comes in and takes over, then that's a good sign. We just move Hayton down the lineup, and that's center depth, and what does every winning team have is center depth. But I think either way it's a win. I mean, we're not going to be going deep in the playoffs this year. We might be one of those surprise, like, oh, are they going to make it? But this is quote unquote a development year until we really start competing.
And the other thing with Nick Bukestad is there's value in investing in Barrett Hayton, because in a year from now, Nick Bukestad's likely not going to be part of this team. He only has 1 year left on his contract. If the team's out of it at the deadline, he could get traded. Even if they make the playoffs, he could get unsigned next year because his role might be overtaken. I think the thinking was that Connor Geekie was going to take that spot. Now he's gone. Maybe that's TJ Iginla who takes his spot a year from now. And then Barrett Hayton is still here, and he has that chemistry with Clayton and Keller and Nick Schmaltz because he played with them this season.
And speaking of Bukestad and having decent face-off performance, Jack McBain has struggled on face-offs so far. He's not been able to hit 50% in his young NHL career. He's under 45%, in fact. And Nick Bukestad is a guy who's played at least half of his NHL games over his long and fruitful career as a winger. So there's some optionality, as John Shaika used to like to say. And I think that we've seen Michelli have chemistry with Bukestad in the past. We've seen Michelli have chemistry with McBain in the past. And I've got an idea in my head for a third line I'd love to see, where it's Jack McBain and Nick Bukestad, where McBain's playing center, Bukestad's taking the draws and switching to right wing. And you've got Michelli over there on the left wing. And that allows us to have Stenlund full-time in the lineup as the 4C, the right-hand shot center that can actually win draws when we absolutely need a face-off win, and we need it to be a right-hander. We have Stenlund available for that. And another note about face-offs, Cooley was pretty darn good for the National Team Development Program prior to going to the Gophers. So there's some potential there, I think, for Cooley to improve his performance in the dot.
Yeah, I remember. Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's another thing too, to keep Hayton on the top line, because Bukestad can play the wing. I don't know if Barrett Hayton can play the wing. So if you did have Bukestad at center on the top line, the next couple of lines down the middle are going to be Logan Cooley, Jack McBain, and Kevin Stenlund. So where does Barrett Hayton fit? I don't think he plays on the wing. I don't think he's built to play on the wing either. He's a center.
I would have to agree. Pat O in the comments also kind of took his stab at maybe our center depth here, with Hayton as the 1C, Cooley as the 2C, Bukestad as the 3, and then McBain and Stenlund kind of switching off in that 4C spot. I think that obviously would be a decent way to kind of split those up. And then Kerfoot can play center too. So unlike years in the past, I think we do have a nice mix here where if, Bukestad plays on the wing, or even if McBain plays a little bit of time on the wing, you got to have coverage for the injuries. And we potentially have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people who can play center on this roster right now. So optionality indeed. And another comment from Pat O that I think just works out really well for the next topic we'd like to talk about is Iginla a center, and potentially part of the reason why Geekie was moved in that Sergachev trade. I know Trent and I had kind of discussed this in depth the other day. So Trent, how about kind of breaking down that conversation as we move into discussing the big signing with adding Iginla at an entry-level contract in ELC?
Yeah, sure. And hey, Pat, perfect segue for us. Thanks, man. So yeah, what I would say about Tej and the center position. So first of all, maybe, maybe he's the center. I'll dive into that. I don't think right off, just to kind of answer that second question first, that played a role in the Geeky trade. I think Cole Baudouin probably was a bigger factor there than Geeky. And it's not as though we had like overwhelming center depth, Baudouin or not, right? So I don't think we would have been opposed to taking a center or two in the first round, even if we hadn't traded Geeky. So the old adage is you can never have too many centers. So I think Geeky's probably a player Tampa really wanted. Geeky's probably a player we identified having the ability to part with without it really cutting the rebuild to the core. In order to bring in a prime aged number one defenseman, the likes of which we haven't had in many, many years. So I think probably not a factor in the trade would be my speculation. Now, as far as Tej playing center, he played center for Seattle. He came up playing center in Junior A, Triple A as a young guy. When he got to Major Junior, he did play 4C for Seattle, penalty kill, kind of grinder, underutilized role, got buried, playing on a powerhouse WHL team that was gunning for the Memorial Cup. They'd made this huge trade to acquire Dylan Gunther, who the Coyotes sent back. They'd picked up Brad Lambert from Europe. They were a powerhouse team, really trying to win the Memorial Cup, not trying to develop young players like Tej. So he got moved back to his hometown in Kelowna and played for a coach there who really wanted to get his confidence back and said, you need to simplify your game, get up and down the boards, do what you do best, play wing. It's a much more straightforward position. There's a lot less decision-making. It's a lot more automatic, and you can really just let your skill take the driver's seat and not have to overthink things too much, which I think is a perfect thing for a player whose confidence maybe wasn't sky high, even though his skill was. So I think it was a really cagey move to put him at winger. I struggle, though, in knowing that his coach did say this was a one-year thing, and he is going to go back to center and play center next year in Kelowna, which is going to be great to see. We saw that with Dylan Gunther after his draft year for the Edmonton Oil Kings. They moved him to center. Now, I don't think many of us expected Gunther to become an NHL center at that point. What we thought was this is a great sign that his coach trusts him. This is a great sign about the well-rounded nature of his game and his ability to think the game. And this is going to help him probably become a better winger at the next level, having spent so much time playing center at a high level like Major Junior. So that's kind of my hope with Tej, is that it's just going to make him a better player and help his development overall. And we're going to ultimately end up with a better pro as a result of him playing center in Major Junior. I don't know that he'll stick. He could. He has a lot of those qualities, that dog on a bone quality that you want to see in a center. But when I started poking around at highly drafted, highly regarded wingers taken out of North America in the first round, we'll say, who later ended up being NHL centers, it's a pretty small list. There's not many great examples. You got to get some deeper cuts. Adam Lowry of the Winnipeg Jets, who's a good center there, played wing, I believe, in his draft year, ultimately became a center. He wasn't really a high pick. Jamie Benn, who's spent a decent amount of time at center in the NHL, but predominantly a winger, was drafted as a winger. So that's another example. There are a few examples in North America, but where this is really common is in Europe. There's a ton of young players drafted as wingers in European professional leagues that later switched to center. A really good example of that is, the Ducks' recent second overall pick, right? He played center or left wing his entire draft year. The Ducks played him at wing this year, and they still see Leo Carlsson as an eventual center, despite the fact he hasn't played the position full-time in 2 or 3 years, right? Yep. So for some reason in the hockey world, we seem to think that Europeans can do this no problem, just as a symptom of the way that their development leagues are structured, where it's they get to professional experience a little bit more quickly over there. We tend to be willing to excuse the fact that they'll play center for a short time, then winger for a long time, then move back to center, right? So we don't see that as much in North America, but every trend has to start somewhere. And maybe this trend starts with Tej. Who knows? He could be the trendsetter here that starts a new thought process on how we develop centers long term. I'm curious to see. It's something I'm very interested to watch next season on CHL TV when I'm absorbing a bunch of Kelowna games, is I want to see how Tej looks at center, and if I think that we may have got the steal of the top 10 and ended up with one of the better centers in the draft potentially. We'll see.
It'd be really interesting. What was that?
I said his dad was certainly a trendsetter, so I wouldn't put
his dad is a power forward. Yeah.
Yep. It's kind of funny when you look back at that draft. Just a little side note, I don't think that Bill Armstrong's keyboard was working because he only drafted C and D the entire draft. It was kind of funny. It's like, can we mix in something else here? It's like, I guess Tej was the only one that was drafted as, according to Utah's official release, is as an F, a forward. So I guess that muddies the water a little bit more on your question there, Pat. But to Trent's point, starting on the wing is definitely a confidence builder, and then you just kind of let it naturally happen from there. That's the most common route for pretty much every player drafted out of junior.
Yeah, well, speaking of Tej, there has been kind of a lot of chatter, especially around the Utah Hockey Club Twitter sphere, about is he going to make the roster this year? And that is mostly because he signed with the club for 3 years on his entry-level contract, an ELC for $975,000 average. That does not mean he is going to be a day one player for the team. And in fact, he may not make the team for another 2-3 seasons, potentially. Most likely, unless he really blows everybody away at training camp, he will be sent back down to juniors to continue his career, and like Trent mentioned, potentially be playing center full-time down in the junior league at the WHL. But Corey, would you mind kind of breaking down what these potential options are for Tej now that he is on that entry-level contract and what exactly that means?
Sure. So for the next 2 years, he only really has two choices, right? It's a two-path street for him. He can play in Utah or he can go back to Kelowna. So in order to play in the AHL, he has to be at least 20 years old. And for him, that's going to be 2 more years in Kelowna. So like I said, next year it's either Utah or Kelowna, same with the following year. And I think a good comparable for him, as we outlined on the Substack, was he could follow a very similar path to Dylan Guenther. And that's not just because they're both WHL guys, but you look at Dylan Guenther, he went back. And I'm pretty sure, too, if you look at Bill Armstrong's time with this franchise and even back to St. Louis, I don't think he has any players that have gone right from junior, right from their draft year into the NHL. It's just, I think Bill recognizes the importance and the value of that development path where you take every step along the way and kind of dominate each level before you move up. And we saw that with Dylan Guenther. I'm pretty sure he had a really good preseason that year, too, really good training camp. There was a possibility he could make the team or even get that 9-game look, and that didn't happen. He went back. And there's value, too, in going back for your start of your junior season, right? Rather than kind of come in midstream, catching up, that sort of thing. So, yeah, for Iginla, he's going to likely go back. I don't even think he's going to get the 9-game trial. Who comes out of the lineup for those 9 games if he's going to play? So
I'd have to agree.
Yeah, I think he's going to go back. And then I think it could be very similar to Dylan Guenther, where not this season, but the coming season, Tej Iginla is going to get a start with Utah. He'll go down to the World Junior Tournament again with Team Canada, because I assume he's going to play this year. So he'll get 2 cracks at that. And then he'll go back to his junior team after that. And then he can be a full-time Utah player in that 3rd year.
Yeah, and that's kind of a common approach. And just to clarify, when you get that 9-game option with the NHL club, that doesn't mean that's just the first 9 games of the season. The Chaika regime, if you will, was almost notorious for kind of making that last way too long, especially for Barrett Hayton, where he was going on road trips. He wasn't playing for 3-4 games at a time and kind of sitting in the press box, and then would play another game and then would be back in the press box for several games. So that could potentially be, all of October and into November until kind of he's ready to go back down to that World Junior tournament. And that is a fantastic development route for those kids, so they can get that taste of the NHL. They can go compete on a huge stage at World Juniors. That's one of my favorite tournaments and favorite times of the year, as it's always right around Christmas time. Yep. Goes kind of into the whole run up to the new year. It's arguably one of my favorite hockey tournaments, period. It's like having kind of the mini Olympics each year. And again, it's the best of those age groups. So this is fantastic development for him. And then he potentially could get traded to one of the most competitive junior hockey teams, like Dylan Guenther did when he got moved to the Seattle Thunderbird, and make a Memorial Cup run. So there will be more for him to learn, even if he puts up, let's just say 70 goals this season. He'll have that time to get kind of that cup of coffee in the NHL, maybe have another big World Junior run, and then potentially Memorial Cup run. So even if he doesn't make the team next season, not this upcoming one, but the following one after that, there's still a lot for him to learn. But again, he may have one of those training camps where he just makes it too hard to send back down, and he sticks. So yeah, again, this year, I think he is pretty much cemented in to go back to juniors, but next year will be the interesting one. Go ahead, Trent.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's going back, and keep an eye out on Kelowna. You know, they did really well in the playoffs, and they're a pretty young team, and I don't think they're losing a whole lot of big pieces there. So they may be a threat, right, this year. So keep an eye on the Rocket. I think the Rockets, I think they could be pretty competitive this year. But I was thinking back to Coyotes players who made the jump after their draft year. Jakob Chychrun was the last one who did it 8 years ago. Nobody expected him to do it. They didn't really want him to do it. He stole the spot. He was too good. He stole a spot, never looked back. He's had injury troubles like crazy. A lot of hard miles on Jakob Chychrun. He seems to have run out of gas a little bit in his career. He just got traded for peanuts a couple weeks ago. So you could argue whether or not that was the right decision for Jakob Chychrun to stick in the NHL so quickly and deal with so much losing on a rebuilding team that he got tired of the situation and ended up wanting out. So I don't know that was wise. Then you got to go back another 8 years, a full 16 for the last example of it, which was Mikkel Bodker. And I think we can all agree that was a very bad choice and harmed his development irreparably. He was never the player he could have been had he been sent back to junior and given proper development time. Mikkel Bodker was not somebody who lacked for confidence in the OHL for the Kitchener Rangers in that Memorial Cup run, where he was absolutely phenomenal and rocketed up draft boards, and the Coyotes took him there very early that year. And he was an incredible looking prospect who came in as a rookie and struggled and never appeared to be a confident player ever again in his entire NHL career. He never seemed to be able to catch that confidence again. So it's a risky proposition to rush kids into the league. Tej is remarkably young for his draft year. He's still 17 years old. He'll be 18 for all of a month before camp starts. And I don't think there's any reason to give him any NHL games at all this season. I think he's got plenty to prove back in junior for Team Canada, plenty of development to do. And I think we owe it to ourselves to see what the center experiment yields for him, what kind of fruit that bears, having him spend time at center. Would you want to limit yourself to a second line winger because you rushed him and cost yourself a first line center because you didn't let him bake? I think that's the math that you have to consider.
Absolutely. Well, while the Tej signing was pretty exciting, I think for all the people kind of digging further down the Utah Hockey Club prospect line and pipeline, we're even more excited about another signing that happened this week, and that was Artyom Duda. This is kind of more of that twist and turn journey that we were kind of hinting at with Hayton. I mean, I would even argue that this was a more unpredictable journey to get to his entry-level contract. And again, very exciting for the fans and kind of the diehards here, because it was getting concerning if we were going to be able to get him overseas. He was a Russian player. He was selected in the second round in the 2021 draft. If I remember correctly, he was our first second round pick that draft class right before Josh Stone, or was Josh Stone before Duda?
Doan was I believe Doan was the first second rounder for the team, but that wasn't
Duda
the same year.
Duda was 2022.
22. So Duda was the first second rounder, and then Julian Lutz after that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so Duda was kind of over guys like Chesley and Seamus Casey, who we kind of all talked a lot about internally, of really kind of hoping for those guys. I was very unfamiliar with Duda at the time, and we took him as well, but had a phenomenal season in the MHL for his draft year, and then has kind of struggled with his playing time and nearly missed an entire season of development last year. Mm-hmm. So Trent, I know you were working on a Duda piece. You want to kind of highlight his journey of how he got here and maybe a little bit of what we can expect for him down at Tucson.
Yeah, 100%. So long and winding road, and at certain points a little bit harrowing, a little bit worrisome. With the geopolitical issues going on with Russia and Ukraine, the war, scary things happening with Philadelphia Flyers goaltenders getting loaded into trucks. I think we all saw the footage that made us very nervous. That was shortly after the Duda selection. And there was talk then that Duda wanted to move on. I saw an interview that I translated to English where he seemed a couple of years ago even to be in a big hurry to get over to the U.S., which is not a popular thing for young players to say over there. He's been pretty public about his desire to leave for a while, which is a bit unique. He's made no apologies for wanting to realize his NHL dreams as soon as possible. And he hasn't been too careful in choosing his words from what I've dug up in interviews, even in Russia. He was somebody that we drafted out of Siska, the Red Army team there in Russia. We've made a lot of sense about being careful about which clubs we draft from when it comes to Russians. We've gone to Yaroslavl Lokomotiv quite a bit. We've gone to Torpedo quite a bit. These are franchises in the KHL that are seen as a bit progressive, a bit forward thinking, and a bit more friendly to younger players when it comes to opportunities that they get. Red Army is not viewed the same way. So Siska is not known to be quite that progressive. And we saw that play out when he wasn't given the opportunities that he felt and we felt he should be given in the men's league there. So he put up the best draft eligible NHL season of a defenseman in the history of that league. And then we picked him 36th overall on the strength of that amazing season. He spent the next year barely playing in the VHL, which is the Russian equivalent of the AHL. It's kind of like the minor men's league there. The quality of that league is very poor. He got some playing time in the MHL as well, and very little time in the KHL. He played, I think, 14 games there, but we're talking about one shift a game, 2 minutes of ice time, 4 minutes of ice time. Less than Liam O'Brien, right? I mean, so not good for his development. He didn't get to play very much. Then he felt inclined to get the heck out of Dodge and try his hand over with the Maine Black Bears and play NCAA. I think the feeling was the way in which his contract was structured, playing predominantly in the junior league in Russia. I'd heard different stories about maybe if there was a way for him to waive the compensation he had for the handful of pro games he played. He might be able to reinstate his NCAA eligibility, whatever. They had a whole lot of different ideas on how he might take advantage of some loopholes or some fuzzy language and get himself into the NCAA. It didn't work. He also wasn't eligible for the USHL, I believe. We couldn't sign him to an NHL or AHL contract. And he ended up playing for U Sports, which is the Canadian university circuit, as a result, because that was pretty much the only place he could catch on. It's a league that people kind of made fun of a little bit at the time when he ended up in it, because you don't normally see a top NHL prospect in that league. It's a league that doesn't get enough credit for people who don't pay attention. Junior players, when they play in the CHL, they get college packages that pay for their university when they move on from the CHL when they age out. So what you're looking at is ex-CHL players largely that were good enough to get university packages from their CHL teams who are now older, that are too old for the CHL. So that's a pretty good league, man. You're looking at guys who are good enough for major junior and are now full-grown men. And that's who he was playing against night in and night out at U Sports for TMU, Toronto Metropolitan University, which I guess probably Corey knows a little bit more about than me. But that's the long and winding road of how Artem Duda got over here, how he ended up in U Sports, and how finally now he was able to sign his pro contract here in the U.S. And I'm sure he's elated to get down to Tucson and start taking care of business down there.
Yeah, and personally, I think there's a lot of JJ Moser to his game. Smooth skating, kind of does a little bit of everything right. Doesn't really potentially excel at too many one aspects of the game. But Corey, Kenny, what are your thoughts on Duda as a player, or any other additional thoughts on kind of the journey of how he got here?
It's just going to be interesting to see how long it takes him to kind of get back up to game speed. He missed a lot of time last year. U Sports is a good league, but it's not on the level of any of the other leagues he could have played in had he stayed in Russia, or had he been able to. I think at one point he was trying to get a deal with Maine of NCAA. Is that right?
That's right. Yep. He was there on campus taking classes and practicing with
all summer, right? Yeah. He was like taking English classes.
Yeah.
So, he'll get his opportunity in Tucson. And you mentioned the Moser comparable, and I have to wonder, did that maybe play into the JJ Moser exit, where if Artem Duda is only 1-2 years away from playing in Utah, that makes Moser's availability, to go into a trade a little bit more likely?
Yeah, I can see that. I think, for me, the one thing that stands out from Duda ahead of Moser, I think you're right on the money, though, Brad. I think he plays that solid, unspectacular, quiet, smooth game like Moser did. I think the one thing that Duda's got going for him is he's got a hell of a shot, especially for a skinny kid. He scored 14 goals in the MHL as a draft-eligible defenseman. He's got a big shot. So I think that that's one thing to keep an eye out for, is that, where Moser was a really solid all-around player, he didn't really want on your power play and kind of did more harm than good out there on the peepers. I think that Duda is a guy who might be a Moser who can actually contribute positively to the power play and be a good weapon on the power play with that big shot.
And one more Russian too to make. I was just going to say, and one more Russian too to make Daniel Boot and Dmitry Simishev a little bit more comfortable in Salt Lake City a year from now.
Yeah, it's a good thing that Sergachev has got such a big wingspan. He's got a lot of kids to bring under those wings here.
And a big paycheck for the big house.
Yeah, I wonder if they're paying him extra for babysitting, because I think that's his unofficial title. Yeah, right. Camp counselor up there in Park City. Yeah.
And if there's one major positive to pull away from his journey, which is an incredible journey, I'm glad you guys brought up Maine, how he was literally there taking English classes. He's motivated. And let's call a spade. Talking against Russia is kind of scary, and trying so hard to get out of there and follow your dreams. It just kind of shows that how motivated and excited he is to play in North America. And I think that once he gets his shot over here, he's going to be more motivated than ever. He's going to, to your point, Corey, he's going to have a while to get back to game speed. But I feel like just what we've seen from a character perspective, I have no doubt that he's going to do everything in his power to do so. So he is a great two-way defender. I love the Moser comparison. I love your thought process there, Corey, that might have made Moser a little bit more expendable. And wouldn't that be amazing that, one of the biggest pieces that we let go to get Sergachev, we have his runner up right around the corner. So I'm excited to see him. All the highlights are awesome. Smooth skater, smart player, great shot, and an awesome passer. So I'm looking forward to it.
In an unconscionably low number of penalty minutes. It's insane. In his draft year, in 52 MHL games, he took 0 penalty minutes. The whole year before that, he played 40 games with 0 penalty minutes. None in the DHL and only 6 in the KHL. So this is a kid who I used to make a joke that his uncle must be connected somewhere to some powerful family in Russia and has influence over the officials. They don't want to blow the whistle on Duda. But yeah, ultra disciplined player apparently, based on the PIMS.
All right, and kind of the last little tidbit that we wanted to just touch on, we'll try to get through this one a little bit quick, but was another small trade that the team made, which was moving Jenik over to the Ottawa Senators for Igor Sokolov. Sorry if I did mispronounce that name. My Russian isn't perfect yet. I should be taking Russian classes while Duda is taking English. But this was kind of a nice change of scenery type trade, especially for Jenik, who just has not been able to carve out a position on the roster, even though he has flashed that he is ready to. I felt like every time he had been called up over the past 2 to 3 seasons, he has made an impact. Oftentimes that impact was the exact opposite of Duda as well, where he found himself in the penalty box quite a bit. He is an absolute agitator. He seemingly pisses off every single other person he plays against. But man, everything screamed Bill Armstrong player until this trade happened. And I do think it's just literally a lack of chairs for him to be able to take a seat on the team right now. So kind of thoughts on this trade. I'm not totally sure what we're going to get from Igor coming back here, even though I've read and kind of heard that he's just the ultimate character guy. But I am very happy for Jenik because he is going to a very mean team where he could probably take a roster spot from day one. And the Senators are going to be pretty tough kind of up and down that lineup if he gets that shot.
He's got a penalty box face. Have you looked at his face? It's just
it's like a hybrid Corey Perry, but with like he always has like a snarl though, where Corey Perry's kind of the type that like laughs at you. Jenik looks like he just took a spit on it. He like Haktua'd you. That other way though.
Sokolov, Haktua, I love it. Haktua hockey. There we go. Sokolov is like the golden retriever, and then Jenik is like that dog that you're looking at, and it's like looking through you. You don't want to pet it. So it is a classic change of scenery, and I hope it works out for both players because from what I've seen in both of them, I like them both. I remember when Jenik just absolutely drilled somebody in the Anaheim Ducks preseason game to the point where everybody was like, what's going on? Like, what is this try hard? It's like, this dude is absolutely trying everything he can to make this team. And so he's just going to level whoever he can. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what Jenik does in Ottawa. I think he'll get a shot here too. And who knows what comes to Sokolov, but overall, there was no pain with this trade. It was beneficial to all parties.
Yeah, not surprised to see it happen. We know that trade request has been sitting out there for about a year now, and we also know that Jenik has that troublesome agent with JP Barry, and I think if you can disassociate yourself with him, that always helps. I don't believe there's any other Utah players that are his clients. But I still wish Jenik had a little bit more opportunity. As much as he took penalties, this was a bad Coyotes team over the last couple of years, so like we couldn't throw him in the lineup over Antoine Roussel or Ryan Dzingel, and it's not like those two players didn't take penalties or some of the other bottom sixers that played in the last couple of years. Yeah, exactly. I hope this isn't. We had a very similar situation a couple of years ago with Michael Bunting where he just didn't get the opportunity. Same kind of storylines. He was taking too many penalties in Tucson. He wasn't going to get the opportunities with the Coyotes. And then he went to Toronto, his hometown, had the big breakout. Still continued to perform in Carolina and Pittsburgh. And so I just wish he had a little bit more opportunity. And like Kenny said, I think he'll have more opportunity on an Ottawa team that's not very good. It'll be easier for him to crack the lineup. And then my one other thing with this trade is just curious how Igor Sokolov got that Utah hat so quickly. You saw the viral clip. I mean, I ordered a hat from NHL.com. It's still not here, and he's ready to go. So how did he get it?
I think with Jenik, you got to earn your coach's trust before you earn your opportunities. And I think he did a lot of shooting himself in the foot. I think he had a hard time earning trust because he was taking penalties too quickly. And his coaches didn't want to put him out there. And I think those veteran players didn't want to kill penalties because some 20-year-old can't control his temper and can't play with discipline. And now they got to be out there blocking shots and diving for pucks and selling out and clearing the zone and They get grumpy pretty quick when a kid can't control himself, right? It's maybe a little bit different when it's a veteran like Dzingel, or one of the captains from Vancouver. I think there's just some element of like hierarchy and veteran element there, where the last person you want in the box making you eat pucks is a rookie. And I think also Tucson was very close to Tempe. I think that Steve Potvin and Andre Tierney probably talk a whole lot, and Jan Jenik kind of made everyone hate him in the AHL too, opposition and maybe more. This is something that's followed him since his OHL days, where he was in trouble a lot too. So I think a fresh start in a new organization would be good for him. I think if anybody needs a clean slate, it's this dude. Hopefully this is a big summer of him chilling out, doing some yoga, meditating, whatever he's got to do to get himself centered. He can still be a pest, but he's got to get other people to take penalties, not take them himself. I remember an AHL game where Boko Imama, before they were teammates, was just chasing him all over the ice. And that's the last guy you want chasing you is Boko Imama, just a absolute legendary enforcer down in the AHL. And he wanted to twist Jenik's head right off his little check shoulders there. So yeah, glad to see Jenik get a fresh start in Ottawa. To your point, Brad, he may get more opportunities there. He'll certainly get a longer look in camp. As far as Sokolov is concerned, I mean, it's just a classic big sniper, opportunistic sniper, gets in great scoring areas, can really bury the puck very well. Tremendous shot. He's a big giant dude. He's been trying to lose weight. I believe he's lost like 20 pounds since his pro career started. But he's not a good skater. He's a bit lumbering out there. He's tried to improve his mobility. He's running out of opportunities to do so. But he's a proven scorer at lower levels. Awesome character guy. Everybody loves him. Super popular. Coaches love him. Very big contrast with Jenik in that regard, where there aren't any of those red flags with Sokolov. He's just, to Kenny's point, that golden retriever that everybody loves. It's just a question of whether those boots can get a little bit quicker and get him back up into the play where he can actually get himself to scoring opportunities at the NHL level before the moment has passed, because we don't need him trailing behind the play and unable to keep up. So that's the big thing for him to work on. He's married now. He's older now. Maybe he's going to get even more dedicated to making the improvements that he needs to make to get up to game speed at the NHL level.
But I'm also fine with keeping Tucson very competitive too. So we got a lot of important players that are going to be making that roster over the next couple of seasons. So the better they,
especially on the wing, man, Noel Nord, Matica, Lutz, I mean, Doan potentially could start down there. And then you had Sokolov, and it's like, holy smokes, that's going to be some powerhouse wingers down there. Young, so we'll see how it all melds together or not. But if things work down there, they could really work down there. We'll see.
And they need the camaraderie down there too. We tend to forget that they have relocation lingering over their heads now too. True. And having a good character guy like Sokolov in there just to kind of lighten the mood, it should help. I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about Jenik, but I would assume he's less approachable than Sokolov will be. And it would be nice to have a guy down there just kind of lighten the mood and keep everybody happy. So looking forward to seeing that too.
And another Russian, to your point, Brad. So we've got another Russian down there on the farm, one who's been over here for many years, unlike Duda, who's been trying to get over here for many years. Sokolov came over to Cape Breton years ago, so he can help with the acclimation of some of those younger guys too. So he might play that cruise ship director, camp counselor role that we've got earmarked for Sergachev up here in Utah. Down in Tucson, that might be Sokolov's role with Koyachonok thrown in the mix as well.
Yep. Excellent. Well, that is our episode. Thank you for tuning in. And again, please give us a subscribe at cleanhits.substack.com for all of our written work. We get about 4 to 5 articles out each week, some exclusively for our paid members, others for the public. And give us a follow on Twitter/X at Clean Hits Hockey. And don't forget to give us a like and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. That goes a long way for us as we continue to grow this community around this fascinating and fantastic team that we are all obsessed with. And we can't wait to see what Bill Armstrong does to continue to shape this into hopefully a contender for many, many, many years. So tune in next week. We'll be either discussing a roster breakdown or maybe even having a special guest. We're still kind of finalizing some of those plans. Always send us comments, things you want us to talk about. Engage with us on Twitter/X. We will make sure that those kind of recommendations either get in articles or in our episodes. We are ready for all the feedback you can possibly give us because we want you to be as big of part of this team and this show/community as we are. So again, thank you for tuning in. We're signing off. Adios. Ciao. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Peace.
Thank you.